I thought I knew what losing someone meant. I'd already said goodbye to Matteo once, or at least that's what I told myself the morning I woke up and he was just gone. No note, no explanation, just an empty apartment and a compass keychain he'd made for me, the only proof he'd ever existed in my life. 3 years of carrying that small brass thing in my apron pocket. 3 years of pretending the weight of it didn't crush me a little more each day. The Silvergate Cafe smelled like burnt coffee and broken dreams on a Tuesday night. But it was mine, my routine, my safety, my carefully constructed invisibility. I'd perfected the art of being forgettable, hair tied back, eyes down, smile polite but empty. The cafe was almost empty that night, just a couple in the corner booth nursing cold lattes. I wiped down tables that were already clean. Anything to keep my hands busy. Anything to keep my mind from wandering back to that morning 3 years ago. Then the door opened, and the air itself seemed to hold its breath. 3 men walked in, but only one mattered. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than 6 months of my rent. Dark hair, darker eyes, and a face that belonged on old Roman coins. Adrian Moretti. Everyone in Seattle knew the name, even if they pretended not to. He sat in my section. I approached their table with steady hands, refusing to acknowledge the way every other customer suddenly found their phones fascinating. "What can I get you?" I asked, my voice flat. "Professional?" Adrian looked up at me, and something flickered across his face. Recognition. Though we'd never met. "Scotch." "Neat." I brought their drinks, set them down, and turned to go. That's when it happened. The compass keychain, Matteo's last gift to me, slipped from my apron pocket. I watched it fall, watched it clatter onto the table directly in front of Adrian Moretti. I reached for it immediately, but Adrian was faster. He picked it up, turned it over in his hands with careful attention. The small brass compass caught the light, and I saw his expression transform. Recognition became shock, became something colder. "Where did you get this?" "Oh, it was a gift. From an ex-boyfriend. Please, I need it back." "What was his name?" "That's none of your business." "His name." I met Adrian's eyes and saw something there that terrified me. Not anger, but devastation carefully controlled. "Matteo," I whispered. His name was Matteo. The color drained from Adrian's face. He stood abruptly. "Come with me." "I'm not going anywhere with you." "Elena Brooks." He said my name like he'd known it all along. "You think I don't know who you are?" The world tilted sideways. "I don't understand." "You will. We can do this here, in front of everyone, or we can talk privately." I followed him out through the back entrance, into the alley behind the cafe. The autumn rain had left everything slick and reflective. Adrian turned to face me, and in the harsh light, I could see the resemblance. The same sharp jawline Matteo had. Matteo was my brother, my younger brother. "And 3 years ago, someone put 2 bullets in his chest and dumped him in Puget Sound." The words didn't make sense. Matteo had left me. He'd walked away. No, that's not true. He left. He just left. He was murdered. "Elena." Adrian stepped closer. "And that compass you've been carrying? It has our family crest on the back. No one outside the family is supposed to have that." I looked down at the keychain in his hand. Really looked at it. The engraving I'd always assumed was decorative. I could see it now. The intricate crest. The Latin motto. Matteo told me he was studying engineering. He lied. He worked for me. For the family business. And someone killed him because of it. Behind Adrian, a black SUV pulled up, its door swinging open. "I've spent 3 years looking for answers," Adrian said. "And then you walk into my city, wearing his symbol. I don't know any secrets. Maybe you do and don't know it. Either way, you're not safe anymore." He pulled out his phone, showed me photos, images of me leaving my apartment, walking to work, all taken from a distance. "These were sent to me this morning." My legs went weak. "Get in the car, Elena. I can protect you. But only if you trust me. I don't even know you. You knew my brother. That's going to have to be enough." I stood there in that alley, every instinct screaming at me to run. But Matteo's compass was still in Adrian's hand, and those photos were real. I took a step forward, then another. As I slid into the leather seat, as the door closed with a final click, I watched the Silvergate Cafe disappear into the distance. Watched my ordinary life fade into memory. Adrian sat across from me in the darkness. He never told you what he really did he? No. Then let me be clear. My brother didn't study engineering. He laundered money, brokered deals, and someone close to us set him up to die. His voice dropped lower. I need to know everything he told you, because somewhere in your memories is the truth about who killed him. The SUV turned onto a street I didn't recognize, heading toward buildings that rose like monuments to money and power. Where are we going? Adrian's phone buzzed. His jaw tightened. He turned the screen toward me. A new photo of me from tonight, taken through the cafe window. Below it, she's with you now. That makes her yours to protect, or ours to take. The building didn't look like a prison from the outside. All glass and steel, rising above the city like a monument to everything I'd never be able to touch. Adrian's driver, a man named Vincent with kind eyes and hands that never strayed far from his jacket, escorted me through a private entrance where no security cameras watched, where the elevator required a fingerprint I didn't have. Adrian pressed his thumb to the panel, and we rose in silence, the city dropping away beneath us until even the lights looked like dying stars. The penthouse apartment was beautiful in the way expensive things are, cold, perfect, untouched by anything as messy as actual living. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum, everything white and chrome and sharp edges. This is where you'll stay. Adrian gestured to a bedroom off the main living area. Everything you need is already here. I walked to the window, pressed my palm against the glass. Somewhere down there was my apartment, my life, my belief that I could just exist quietly enough that the universe would forget about me. For how long? Until it's safe. And when will that be? Adrian didn't answer. He was already moving through the space like he owned it, which, I realized, he probably did. He poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter, the amber liquid catching the light. You can't keep me here. I said it without conviction, because we both knew he could. I'm not keeping you. I'm protecting you. There's a difference. Is there? He turned to face me, and in the low light, he looked so much like Matteo it hurt. The same intensity. The same way of looking at you like he could see straight through skin and bone to the truth you were hiding. My brother died because someone wanted to send a message. His voice was careful, controlled. You're alive because they haven't decided yet whether you're useful or just loose ends. I'd prefer to keep it the first way. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the ambient warmth. I don't know anything. Matteo never told me about any of this. Then we'll figure out what you know without knowing it. Adrian drained his glass. Vincent will be outside. Don't try to leave. Don't call anyone. Don't do anything that makes my job harder. What is your job exactly? Keeping you alive. He paused at the door. Get some sleep, Elena. Tomorrow we start going through everything. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a cell locking. I stood there for a long time, watching the city breathe below me. Somewhere out there, my manager at the cafe was probably wondering why I'd disappeared mid-shift. My neighbor was probably feeding the stray cat I'd been secretly caring for. My life was continuing without me. And I was trapped in this beautiful cage with a man who looked at me like I was a puzzle he needed to solve before I got us both killed. Sleep didn't come easy. When it did, I dreamed of Matteo. His hands building that compass, his smile that never quite reached his eyes, his voice saying goodbye in a dream I didn't remember having. I woke up gasping, sheets twisted around me like restraints. The apartment was dark, except for a sliver of light under the main door. I got up, pulled on the robe someone had left folded on the chair, silk, expensive, nothing like anything I'd ever owned, and walked out into the living room. Adrian was still awake, sitting at a massive desk with papers spread across it like evidence at a crime scene. His jacket was gone, sleeves rolled up, and I could see a tattoo on his forearm, the same crest from Matteo's compass, rendered in black ink. He looked up when I entered, no surprise in his expression, like he'd been expecting me. Can't sleep. Would you? I moved closer, drawn despite myself to the papers scattered across the desk. What is all this? Matteo's life. Adrian's voice was tired. Every transaction, every meeting, Every person he talked to in the 6 months before he died. I saw photos. Mateo at restaurants, Mateo getting into cars, Mateo with men I didn't recognize. In every picture, he looked different from the man I'd known. Harder, more alert, like he was always watching for danger. He looks like a stranger. He was, to you? Adrian pulled out a worn leather bracelet, set it on the desk between us. He never took this off, until the night he died. We found it in his apartment, next to a note that said, your name. My hand trembled as I picked it up. The leather was soft from wear, and I could smell it. Mateo's cologne, faint but unmistakable. I'd bought him this bracelet for his birthday, back when I thought we were building something real. What did the note say? Just your name. And an address in Vancouver. Adrian watched me carefully. Did he ever mention Vancouver? Ever suggest you go there? I shook my head, but even as I did, something tugged at my memory. A weekend Mateo had canceled plans, said he had to help a friend move. He'd come back with Canadian coins in his pocket, laughed it off when I asked about them. Maybe once? He had coins. Adrian leaned forward, suddenly focused. When? 6 months before he left. I couldn't finish. Before someone put 2 bullets in him and dumped him in the bay. Adrian finished for me, brutal in his precision. That's exactly when he started pulling away from the family. When he started questioning orders. He rifled through papers, found what he was looking for. Bank statements with transactions highlighted in yellow. These are accounts we didn't know about. Money moving in patterns that don't match our operations. His finger traced the dates, all starting around the time he went to Vancouver. I stared at the numbers, meaningless to me but clearly significant to Adrian. You think he was stealing from you? I think he was trying to get out. Adrian's voice went soft, and someone didn't want to let him. The weight of that settled over us like snow. Mateo had been trying to leave, maybe trying to leave for me, and it had gotten him killed. I need you to think, Elena. Adrian stood, moved around the desk until he was close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him. Every conversation, every strange phone call, every time he seemed scared or distracted or not quite himself, every gift he gave you. Just the compass. Are you sure? I wanted to say yes. But the truth was, I'd been so desperate not to see what was right in front of me that I'd probably missed everything important. He gave me a book once. Poetry. Said it reminded him of me. It felt stupid even saying it. Do you still have it? In my apartment. Adrian pulled out his phone, made a call. His voice was low, commanding. I need a team at Elena Brooks' address. Full sweep. Bring me everything. Books, papers, anything with writing. He paused. And make sure no one follows you. He hung up and looked at me. They'll be there in 20 minutes. You're breaking into my apartment. I'm protecting evidence. He corrected. If someone's watching you, they're watching your apartment too. Anything Mateo gave you might be the key to understanding what got him killed. I should have been angry, should have protested. But standing there in borrowed silk, holding Mateo's bracelet, I realized I wanted answers more than I wanted privacy. What happens if we find something? Then we find who killed him. Adrian's eyes were dark, promising violence. And we make sure they understand what it costs to take something from me. The casual brutality of it should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like a promise. Like for the first time in 3 years, someone was on my side. We sat in silence, waiting for his team to call back. Adrian poured me a drink I didn't ask for, and I took it because my hands needed something to hold. The whiskey burned going down, but it pushed back the cold that had settled in my chest. He talked about you sometimes. Adrian said suddenly. Mateo. He'd come home from seeing you and he'd be different, lighter. Like you were the only good thing in his life. Then why didn't he tell me the truth? Because the truth would have made you a target. Adrian finished his own drink. What you don't know can't be tortured out of you. The words landed like a punch. That's what Mateo had been protecting me from. Not heartbreak, but interrogation. Not abandonment, but assassination. Adrian's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, then his expression shifted into something dangerous. Say that again. I watched his jaw tighten, watched his free hand curl into a fist. Secure the perimeter. I'm on my way. He ended the call and looked at me with eyes that had gone completely cold. Someone got to your apartment first, tore the place apart. He moved toward the door, already calling for Vincent. They were looking for something. Did they find it? Adrian paused, turned back. They found a message. On your mirror. Written in what my team thinks is your lipstick. What did it say? He pulled out his phone, showed me a photo. My bathroom mirror, smeared with red letters I recognized as my favorite MAC lipstick, the one Mateo had given me for my birthday 2 years ago. We know what he told you. Tick-tock, Elena. They moved me before sunrise. Adrian didn't explain where we were going, just appeared at my door with a duffel bag and an expression that told me questions would waste time we didn't have. The safe house was in Belltown, the kind of building you'd walk past without noticing. Inside, it smelled like dust and something metallic I didn't want to identify. How long? I asked. As long as it takes. He pulled out a laptop, opened files that made my head spin. Financial records, names I didn't recognize. This was Mateo's world, the one he'd kept hidden. Your team found something in my apartment. Adrian reached into his jacket, pulled out the poetry book. Neruda. Mateo had given it to me on our 6-month anniversary. Adrian opened it carefully, and I saw numbers written in the margins in Mateo's handwriting. Not page numbers, coordinates, account numbers. He hid it in plain sight. My voice came out hollow. These accounts are offshore. The kind you use when you're planning to disappear, or when you're planning to expose something. Adrian looked up at me. Realization hitting. He was going to turn on the family, or he was trying to save you from something worse. Adrian's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his face transformed into ice. Someone hit one of our warehouses, took out 3 of my men. He moved toward the door. This is retaliation, because of me, and because someone's afraid of what you might know. After he left, hours passed. My burner phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. He's lying to you. Ask him about Vancouver. Ask him who gave the order. Vincent appeared immediately. We're moving again. The second safe house was above a laundromat. Vincent left me there alone. I opened the laptop, typed in variations of Mateo's name and Vancouver. Then I found it. A news article from 3 years ago. Unidentified man found deceased in hotel room. Police investigating suspicious circumstances. The dates aligned too perfectly. Mateo had gone to Vancouver. Someone had died. And weeks later, Mateo disappeared into Puget Sound. When Adrian returned, he looked like he'd been through hell. Jacket torn, blood on his knuckles. The warehouse attack. It was Ricardo Leone's people. Who's Ricardo? My second in command, my brother's best friend, the man I trusted more than anyone. He saw what I'd been reading on the laptop screen. The man who died was a federal agent. Mateo was his informant. Adrian's voice was flat. Mateo figured out that Ricardo was running drugs and trafficking through our operations. The agent was killed when Ricardo found out. Mateo was supposed to be next. You knew all of this and you still brought me into it. I didn't know why Mateo died until I started digging. And then you appeared, wearing his symbol. An explosion rattled the windows. Adrian was moving instantly, pulling me up. Vincent burst in. They found us. Multiple shooters. We need to move. We ran through chaos into an SUV as gunfire cracked through the air. Adrian's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. It's Ricardo. He answered on speaker. I have something you want. Elena's neighbor, Mrs. Chen. Ricardo's voice was smooth. She comes to me, tells me everything Mateo told her, and Mrs. Chen goes home. Or she becomes another sad story. Where? The warehouse where it all started. Come alone. Both of you. The line went dead. It's a trap, Vincent said. But he's got a civilian. I said, we go. We give him what he wants. He wants you dead. Then we make sure he doesn't succeed. Adrian made calls, gave orders. Then he pulled out a gun, showed me how to hold it. Last resort only. The warehouse looked abandoned but felt like a trap. Adrian's backup arrived, men who moved like soldiers. We walked into that warehouse together. Ricardo waited in the center, spotlit by afternoon sun. Mrs. Chen sat in a chair beside him, duct tape across her mouth, her eyes wide with fear. Let her go. Adrian's voice echoed. This is between us. Mateo was a traitor. Ricardo's warmth vanished. He was going to destroy everything. You were trafficking people. That's profit. Ricardo pulled a gun, pressed it against Mrs. Chen's temple. Tell me what Mateo told Elena. Tell me where his evidence is. You're not walking anywhere. Ricardo smiled. That's what I thought. The warehouse erupted. Gunfire shattered the air. I dropped, crawling toward Mrs. Chen. Ricardo grabbed my arm, yanked me up. Drop your weapons or she dies. Adrian stood 15 feet away, gun raised, aimed at Ricardo's head. Let her go. It ends with you staying. Permanently. Unless you tell me where Mateo's evidence is. I thought about the poetry book, the numbers, and I realized Mateo had trusted me to know what to do with it. The evidence isn't hidden. I already sent it. This morning, every account, every transaction, every name, the FBI office in Seattle. Special Agent Sarah Morrison. Ricardo went still. You're lying. She's had the evidence for 6 hours. Federal warrants are already being issued. For you, Ricardo, just you. Adrian fired once. Ricardo stumbled backward. Adrian's team moved in, securing the area. Adrian reached me, pulled me into his arms. Are you hurt? I'm okay. Ricardo lay on the concrete, dying. Adrian knelt beside him. You should have stopped when Mateo died. Ricardo's eyes went distant, and his breathing stopped. We walked out together. But as we reached the SUV, Adrian's phone rang. He looked at the screen, face pale. It's the federal agent, the one you mentioned, but I made that name up. He answered. Put it on speaker. Mr. Moretti, this is Special Agent Morrison. We received a package from Mateo Moretti, postmarked 3 years ago, with instructions to open it only if Elena Brooks contacted us, or if she died, or if she disappeared for more than 72 hours. Your surveillance triggered all 3 alerts. The line went dead. Adrian looked at me. Realization dawning. Mateo hadn't just left me evidence. He'd left me a dead man's switch. And we'd just activated it. The FBI field office smelled like burnt coffee and institutional anxiety. Special Agent Sarah Morrison sat across from us, sharp-eyed and professional. She spread photographs across the table, images from Mateo's files, his handwriting documenting everything. The package your brother sent was comprehensive. He'd been working with Agent David Chen for 18 months before Chen was murdered in Vancouver. My stomach dropped. Chen, Mrs. Chen's son. That's why Ricardo took her. Revenge. Exactly. Morrison leaned back. What do you want from us? The truth. She studied us both. Mateo's package contained evidence against Ricardo Leone, but also against the Moretti family's broader operations. Adrian's hand found mine under the table. Morrison pulled out another document, Mateo's handwriting. If you're reading this, Elena, it means I failed. Agent Morrison has everything she needs to take down Ricardo, but she also has evidence against Adrian. Use it or don't. That choice is yours now. Trust your instincts. And if my brother finds you, if he keeps you safe the way I couldn't, maybe trust him too. He's a better man than he thinks he is. My vision blurred. He left me a choice. He left you power. Morrison leaned forward. Your testimony could make the difference between dismantling one criminal enterprise or 2. Adrian stood abruptly, walked to the window. Can I speak to Elena alone? Morrison nodded and left. The silence stretched. You should do it. Adrian's voice was quiet. Testify. Give them everything. Adrian. My brother was right, about all of it. He turned to face me. I've been telling myself for years that what we do is necessary, but Mateo saw it clearly. We're complicit. I'm complicit. He knelt in front of my chair. You owe me nothing, Elena. But you owed Mateo everything, and he's asking you to make this right. What about you? I'll deal with the consequences. I placed my hand over his. Mateo's letter said you're a better man than you think you are. Mateo was always too generous. Was he? You've risked everything to protect me. But I didn't. Morrison returned. Have you made a decision? I'll testify about Ricardo's operation. I took a breath. But I need something in exchange. Immunity for Adrian. Complete immunity. In exchange, He helps you dismantle the family's illegal operations. Becomes an asset. Morrison made a call, then returned. My superiors are willing to consider it. Conditional on full cooperation. Agreed. Adrian said immediately. Then we have a deal. As we left the building, Adrian stopped on the steps, breathing deep. What happens now? Now I figure out who I am when I'm not running my father's empire. He looked at me. And you figure out who you are when you're not running from ghosts. Vincent was waiting by the SUV, his expression grim. We have a problem. Ricardo wasn't working alone. He showed us surveillance footage. A distinguished older man directing operations. Adrian's face went pale. That's Marcus Leone, Ricardo's father. Adrian's phone buzzed. A photograph? Mrs. Chen outside her apartment. In the corner, a man with a camera. Watching her. Below. You took my son. I'll take everyone you've tried to protect. He's declaring war. Then we move faster. My voice was steady. We get everyone vulnerable somewhere safe. Adrian studied my face. You understand what you're signing up for? This is war. People die in wars. People die when they do nothing too. Mateo died doing something. I'd rather die like him than live scared. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Okay, then we do this together. All of it. He started making calls, coordinating protection, organizing responses. Finally, he turned to me. I need you to talk to Morrison. Tell her about Marcus, because right now you're the only person who doesn't have blood on their hands. Okay, I'll go. Then come back, because whatever happens next, I need you here, with me. I'll come back. We're in this together. Vincent drove me to the FBI office. Morrison listened, her expression darkening. If Marcus Leone is willing to target civilians, we can bring in counterterrorism resources. My phone rang. Adrian. Marcus just hit one of our properties. I forwarded the message to Morrison. She arranged federal protection for everyone on Ricardo's contact list. Then Adrian called again. Marcus has the poetry book. Mateo's book with all the account numbers. But that's impossible. He has someone inside my organization. Adrian's voice was hollow, which means everything's compromised. What do we do? You stay with Morrison. I'm going to find who betrayed us. No, together. Tell me where you are. The silence stretched. The original Moretti estate. Bainbridge Island. That's where this started. I'm on my way. Elena, when you get here, you follow my lead. If things go wrong, you run. Same rules apply to you. Deal. Vincent drove to the ferry. We crossed in silence, the city fading behind us. Adrian was waiting at the estate gate. You shouldn't be here. Too late now? He handed me a panic button. You press this. Every federal agent converges here. Morrison's on standby. We walked up the driveway together. The front door stood open. Marcus Leone stood in the foyer, holding Mateo's book. Adrian and Miss Brooks. How unexpected. You have something that belongs to my brother. I've already moved everything in this book, hidden it. Then why are we here? Closure. You took my son. I want to understand why. Your son was trafficking human beings, children. My son was building an empire. Your son was a monster. Marcus pulled a gun. Adrian fired first. Marcus stumbled backward, but men appeared from doorways, 4 of them, all armed. Adrian pushed me behind him, returning fire. I pressed the panic button. Nothing happened. Jammed. We're on our own. The firefight was chaos. I dropped behind a column, watched Adrian fight. One of Marcus's men got close, weapon aimed at Adrian's back. I grabbed a candlestick and swung. The man dropped. Adrian spun. I told you to stay back. And I told you we're in this together. Footsteps at the door. Federal agents. Morrison appeared. Everyone okay? Adrian crossed to me, pulled me into his arms. You could have died. So could you. I'm expendable. You're not. That's the stupidest thing you've ever said. We're both human. That's the whole point. None of us are expendable. We're just trying. Adrian's eyes searched mine. Okay. Morrison cleared her throat. We need statements. Tomorrow. Adrian said. Tonight, we're done. We left together, Sat on the dock watching Seattle shimmer across the sound. What happens now? Now we testify. Dismantle what's left. Build something new, something clean. He turned to look at me. With you, if you'll... Yes. I didn't finish. You don't have to. The answer's yes. We sat until sunrise, painting the sky pink and gold. Adrian's phone buzzed. Morrison, she wants us at 9. That gives us 3 hours. To do what? I stood, held out my hand. To be human, to figure out who we are when we're not surviving. He took my hand. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I. But I think we learned together. We walked back toward whatever came next, hands intertwined. Behind us, the sun rose higher, burning away shadows. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt hope. The trauma lived in my body before it lived in my mind. That's what the therapist Morrison assigned me said during our first session, 3 days after Marcus Leone was taken into federal custody. She sat across from me in an office that smelled like lavender and false comfort, asking questions I didn't have answers to. When did you first feel unsafe? When did you realize your life had fundamentally changed? When did you understand that the man you loved had been a construct, a beautiful lie designed to protect you from a truth too dangerous to touch? I told her about the compass, about the night at the Silver Gate Cafe, about Adrian's face when he recognized his family's crest on something I'd carried for 3 years like a talisman against forgetting. What I didn't tell her, what I couldn't articulate even to myself, was that the real trauma hadn't been discovering Mateo's lies. It had been discovering my own willingness to believe them. How desperately I'd clung to the fiction of the engineering student with gentle hands and Sunday morning promises, even when every instinct screamed that something was wrong, even when he'd come home with bruises he couldn't explain, and phone calls he'd take in another room and a distance in his eyes that grew wider every day until it swallowed him completely. I'd chosen blindness, chosen safety over truth, and Mateo had died because I'd been too afraid to ask the questions that might have saved him. The therapist wanted me to say it wasn't my fault, that I was a victim, that the circumstances were beyond my control. But sitting in Adrian's penthouse apartment, the real one now, not a safe house, with views of Elliott Bay and furniture that actually looked lived in, I couldn't make myself believe that comfortable lie anymore. You're thinking too loud. Adrian's voice came from the kitchen, where he was attempting to make coffee in a machine that probably cost more than my monthly rent used to be. I can hear the spiral from here. I turned from the window, watched him navigate the elaborate espresso setup with the same focused intensity he brought to everything. 3 weeks since Bainbridge Island, 3 weeks of depositions and interviews, and Morrison's careful orchestration of our transformation from criminals to cooperating witnesses. 3 weeks of living in this strange limbo where Adrian was dismantling his father's empire piece by piece, while I tried to figure out who Elena Brooks was, when she wasn't running or hiding or pretending the world was smaller than it actually was. I was thinking about Mateo, I admitted, about how much I didn't want to see. Adrian set down 2 cups of coffee, mine with too much cream, the way I liked it, a detail he'd noticed without being told. He sat beside me on the couch, close enough that our shoulders touched, far enough that I didn't feel trapped. He didn't want you to see. Adrian's voice was careful. That was the whole point. He built a version of himself that you could love without danger. That's not on you, Elena. That's on him. On us. On the whole fucked up system that makes people think lying is the same as protecting. Is it different? Lying and protecting? He considered this, staring into his coffee like it held answers. I used to think they were the same thing. That's how I justified it. Every omission, every half-truth, every time I let someone believe something that wasn't quite real, because the reality was too complicated or too dangerous or too ugly to speak out loud. He looked at me then, his whiskey-colored eyes holding mine. But I was wrong. Lying is about control. Protecting is about trust. Mateo lied because he didn't trust you to make your own choices if you knew the truth. That's not love, Elena. That's fear dressed up in noble intentions. The words hit harder than I expected. Because he was right. Because somewhere deep down, I'd always known Mateo hadn't trusted me with his real self, hadn't believed I was strong enough or brave enough or resilient enough to love him if I saw the darkness underneath. And maybe he'd been right not to trust me. Maybe 3 years ago, I would have run. Would have chosen safety over complexity, comfort over truth. But I wasn't that person anymore. When do we meet with Morrison again? I asked, changing the subject because some truths were too raw to sit with for long. 2 hours. She wants to walk us through the timeline for Ricardo's trafficking network. Show us the evidence we'll need to authenticate. Adrian's jaw tightened. There are victims, Elena. Survivors who've agreed to testify. Kids, some of them. Teenagers who were promised jobs or opportunities and ended up... He didn't finish. Didn't need to. I'd seen some of the preliminary reports Morrison had shared. Clinical language describing horror. Statistics that represented shattered lives. Ricardo Leone hadn't just been running an operation. He'd been destroying human beings for profit. And Adrian had worked beside him for years without knowing. Or, and this was the question that haunted him, I could see it in the set of his shoulders, without wanting to know. You couldn't have seen it, I said quietly. He was careful, deliberate. That's what Morrison said. He compartmentalized, kept his trafficking operation completely separate from family business. But I should have questioned why he needed so many warehouses, why certain shipments were off limits even to me, why he was suddenly so wealthy when the legitimate operations were barely breaking even. Adrian set down his coffee cup with more force than necessary. I didn't want to see, just like you with Mateo. We're the same that way, you and me. We chose comfortable lies over complicated truths. And now we're choosing differently. Are we? He turned to face me fully. Or are we just trading one set of lies for another? Playing the reformed criminals for Morrison's benefit? Performing redemption for an audience that will never really trust us? Is that what you think we're doing? Performing? I don't know what I think anymore. The admission came out harsh, frustrated. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about my family, about what we were building, it's all wrong. My father built an empire on violence and fear. My brother died trying to expose it. My best friend was a monster. And I was so busy maintaining control, keeping everything running smoothly, that I missed all of it. He stood abruptly, paced to the window, his reflection overlaying the city beyond. Maybe Morrison's wrong about me. Maybe I can't be reformed. Maybe I'm too broken, too complicit, too... Stop. I crossed to him, placed my hand on his arm until he looked at me. You're not broken. You're human. Imperfect and flawed and trying, which is all any of us can do. You sound like the therapist. Good. She's smart. I managed a small smile. And she's right. Trauma lives in the body before it lives in the mind. We can't think our way out of this, Adrian. We have to feel our way through. His hand came up, covered mine where it rested on his arm. I don't know how to do that. Feel things. I spent my whole life learning not to. Then we learned together. One feeling at a time. Something in his expression softened. Without speaking, he pulled me into his arms, and we stood there in the light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, holding each other like shipwreck survivors who'd found something solid to cling to in the endless water. My phone buzzed. I pulled away reluctantly, checked the screen. Morrison, need you both at the office early. New development. I showed Adrian. His expression went carefully neutral, the mask he wore when preparing for bad news. Let's go. Morrison's office looked like organized chaos. Files everywhere, whiteboards covered in names and connections. 3 other agents I didn't recognize hunched over laptops. She looked up when we entered, her expression grim. Marcus Leone made bail. The words hung in the air like a threat. How? Adrian's voice was sharp. His bail was set at $20 million. Even with his resources. Someone posted it, anonymously, through a series of shell corporations that we're still trying to trace. Morrison pulled up documents on her computer screen. He was released 2 hours ago. Ankle monitor, travel restrictions, the usual conditions. But he's out. My stomach dropped. He's going to run. Or he's going to retaliate. Morrison's eyes moved between us. We've increased security on all the survivors willing to testify. But I need you both to understand, this changes the timeline. The trial was supposed to be 6 months out. Now we're pushing for an expedited hearing, 60 days, maybe less. Can you make that happen? Adrian was already in problem-solving mode, the same focused intensity I'd seen him bring to dismantling his father's empire. With your cooperation? Yes, but it means everything accelerates. Depositions, evidence review, witness prep. You'll be living this case day and night until it's over. Morrison looked at me. Elena, you'll need to be prepared for Ricardo's defense team to tear apart every aspect of your relationship with Mateo. They'll paint you as a spurned lover with an agenda, someone who can't be trusted. Let them. I was surprised by how steady my voice was. I know what's true. That's enough. Morrison's expression shifted into something that might have been respect. Good. Because we're going to need that certainty. She pulled out another file, this one thicker than the others. There's something else. Something I need you both to see before you're deposed. She opened the file, spread photographs across her desk. Crime scenes. Bodies. Victims of Ricardo's operation, documented in clinical detail that made my stomach turn. These are the cases we can prove. 17 victims over 5 years. Trafficking patterns that extended from Seattle to Vancouver to Portland. A network we're still mapping. Morrison's voice was professional, but I heard the fury underneath. And hidden in Ricardo's files, we found something else. She pulled out a single photograph. A young woman, maybe 20, Fard, with dark hair and scared eyes. She stood in what looked like a warehouse, surrounded by men I didn't recognize. Except one. Mateo. My breath caught. Adrian went very still beside me. Your brother wasn't just documenting Ricardo's operation. Morrison's words were careful, measured. He was part of it. At least initially. These photos are from 3 years ago, 6 months before he started cooperating with Agent Chen, before he tried to get out. I stared at Mateo's face in that photograph. Younger, harder, with none of the gentleness I remembered. He stood with his arms crossed, watching as men loaded people into shipping containers. Not rescuing them, not documenting for evidence, participating. No. The word came out instinctively. Mateo wouldn't. I'm sorry, Elena. Morrison's voice softened slightly. But the evidence is clear. He was involved. And then something changed. Something made him realize what he was part of and decide to stop it. What changed? Adrian's voice was hollow. Morrison pulled out another photograph. Mateo and a young woman, sitting in a cafe, his hand covering hers. The woman was crying. Her name was Sarah Kim. She was 17 when Ricardo's network brought her from Korea under the promise of a restaurant job. She escaped, found her way to Mateo, somehow convinced him to help her. Morrison paused. 2 weeks later, she was found dead in an alley in Vancouver, officially ruled a suicide. But Agent Chen suspected otherwise. The room spun. I gripped the edge of Morrison's desk, trying to find something solid. Mateo started cooperating because of her. Adrian's voice was distant, like he was working through a problem. He saw what the operation actually did. Put a face to the statistics, and it destroyed him. That's our working theory, and it explains why he was so desperate to document everything, not just for justice, but for Sarah. For all of them. Morrison gathered the photographs. But Elena, you need to understand what this means for the trial. Ricardo's defense will use this against us. They'll argue that Mateo was a willing participant who only turned informant when it benefited him. They'll paint him as a criminal trying to save himself, not a hero trying to stop trafficking. He wasn't a hero, I heard myself say. He was a man who did terrible things and then tried to make them right. That's not heroism. That's just being human. Morrison studied me for a long moment. Can you testify to that? Can you stand in front of a jury and explain that the man you loved was complicit in crimes that destroyed lives, and that his redemption doesn't erase his guilt? Yes. The word came out steady. Certain. Because it's true. And because the survivors deserve better than comfortable lies about noble motivations. They deserve the whole truth, even when it's ugly. Adrian's hand found mine, squeezed once. When I looked at him, I saw the same realization in his eyes that was crystallizing in my own understanding. This was what Morrison had meant when she said we'd have to feel our way through. We'd have to sit with the discomfort of Mateo being both victim and perpetrator, of Adrian being both protector and collaborator, of me being both innocent and willfully blind. We'd have to hold all of it, the contradictions, the complexity, the human messiness of people who did harm and sought redemption and never quite achieved the simple categories we wanted to put them in. There's one more thing. Morrison pulled out a sealed envelope. Mateo left this with Agent Chen. Instructions to give it to you, Elena, only if his full involvement in Ricardo's operation came to light. My hands shook as I took the envelope. Inside, a single page in Mateo's careful handwriting. Elena, if you're reading this, you know the worst thing about me. Not the lies I told you, not the double life I lived, but the fact that I participated in something evil before I tried to stop it. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even deserve your memory. But I need you to understand. Meeting you didn't make me want to change. Sarah did. Seeing what my choices had done to her, to all of them, that's what broke me. You were the reason I thought I could survive the change. The light I held on to when everything else was drowning me. I know that's not fair to you, to make you my reason without giving you the choice. But I was desperate and scared, and I loved you more than I've ever loved anything. And I thought if I could just finish this, expose Ricardo, take down the network, save the people still trapped, then maybe I could come back to you clean. Maybe I could be the man you thought I was. I'm so sorry, Elena, for using you, for lying to you, for loving you when I had no right to ask that of anyone. You deserved better than me. You deserve better than this whole fucked up situation. If Adrian keeps you safe, and I think he will, because he's better at protecting people than I ever was, try to forgive him too. For not seeing what Ricardo was doing, for the times he'll blame himself for my death. He couldn't have stopped this. Only I could have, and I was too late. Live well. Live loudly. Live like you're not afraid of taking up space in the world. That's all I want for you now. Mateo. I read it twice before the tears came. Not for the Mateo I'd invented, the gentle engineering student with Sunday morning promises, but for the real Mateo, the broken, guilty, desperately seeking redemption version who'd tried to claw his way back to something good and died before he made it. Adrian's arms came around me, and I let myself cry against his chest while Morrison quietly left the room, giving us privacy I hadn't asked for but needed anyway. He loved you. Adrian's voice was rough. Even with everything else, even with all his failures, that part was real. I know. I pulled back, wiped my eyes, and it doesn't make the rest okay. Doesn't excuse what he did, but it makes him human, complicated and flawed and trying, just like the rest of us. Can you still testify? Knowing all this, I looked at him, this man who'd upended my life, who'd forced me to see truths I'd spent years avoiding, who was trying to become something better than what his family had made him. Yes, because the survivors need someone to tell the truth about what happened, not a sanitized version, not a story with clear heroes and villains, the actual complicated, messy, human truth. I took a breath. And because Mateo was right about one thing, I deserve to live loudly, to take up space, to stop being afraid of being seen. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Pride mixed with something deeper, something that looked dangerously like love. Then we do this together. We tell the truth, all of it. And we let the jury decide what justice looks like when everyone's guilty of something. The depositions took 3 days. 3 days of recounting every conversation with Mateo, every detail I remembered about his behavior in those final months, every moment when I'd chosen not to ask questions because the answers might destroy the comfortable fiction I was living in. Ricardo's defense attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Vance who wore power suits and asked questions like she was performing surgery, tried to paint me as unreliable, a woman scorned, someone who'd twisted Mateo's memory to serve my own narrative. Isn't it true, Miss Brooks, that you were angry when Mateo left you? That you felt abandoned, betrayed, desperate for answers that never came? Yes. I met her eyes steadily. I was all those things. And isn't it possible that your anger has colored your perception of events? That you've retrofitted your memories to fit the story you want to tell? No. I kept my voice level. I've retrofitted my memories to fit the truth, which is different than the story I wanted to believe. The story was that Mateo was a good man who loved me. The truth is that he was a complicated man who did terrible things, tried to make them right, and died before he finished. Both things can be true. That's what makes it real. Vance studied me for a long moment, then changed tactics. You're in a relationship with Adrian Moretti now, is that correct? We're together. Yes. The brother of the man you claim to have loved, the man whose organization employed Ricardo Leone. Don't you see a conflict of interest there, Miss Brooks? How can we trust your testimony when you're romantically involved with someone who has every reason to deflect blame onto Ricardo? Adrian's not deflecting blame. He's accepting it. I looked at Morrison, who nodded slightly, permission to continue. He's cooperating with the FBI, dismantling his family's operations, testifying against everyone involved, including himself when relevant. We're not asking you to see him as innocent. We're asking you to see him as someone taking responsibility. And you think that's enough? That cooperation erases guilt? No. I think cooperation is the beginning of accountability, not the end. I think it's what you do when you realize you've been wrong and you want to be less wrong going forward. I leaned forward slightly. And I think the jury deserves to hear from people who actually know what it's like to be complicit in something terrible and try to become better, not people who've never made mistakes, people who've made them and lived with the consequences. Vance's expression flickered, surprise, maybe, or reluctant respect. No further questions. That night, Adrian and I sat on his balcony watching the city lights reflect off Elliott Bay. He'd been quiet since leaving Morrison's office, processing his own deposition where he'd been forced to enumerate every decision he'd made that had allowed Ricardo's operation to flourish. I told them about Vancouver. He said suddenly, about the night Mateo came back different. I'd known something happened. I just didn't ask. Why not? Because asking would have meant admitting I didn't have control, that something in my organization was operating outside my knowledge. He laughed, bitter and sharp. My father used to say the key to power was never admitting you didn't know something, never showing weakness, never giving anyone leverage by acknowledging ignorance. Your father was wrong about a lot of things. Yeah. Adrian pulled me closer, his arm around my shoulders. We sat in silence for a while, comfortable in a way I hadn't expected. The therapy Morrison mandated was supposed to help us process trauma, build coping mechanisms, learn to function in a world where we weren't constantly running or fighting. But this, sitting together in the quiet, holding space for complicated feelings, this was doing more than any therapy session could. Morrison called while you were in the shower. Adrian said eventually. Marcus Leone violated his bail conditions, removed his ankle monitor. He's in the wind. My stomach dropped. Does she know where? Not yet. But she's got alerts on all his known associates and teams monitoring the survivors under protection. He squeezed my shoulder. We're safe. Vincent's outside. Morrison has agents on the building. Marcus would have to be suicidal to come after us now. But he might be, I pointed out. His son is dead. His operation is dismantled. His legacy is about to be exposed in federal court. What does he have left to lose? Everything. If he runs, he loses his freedom forever. If he retaliates, he proves every allegation we've made. His only play is to disappear, rebuild somewhere else, and hope we can't extradite. You sound like you know how he thinks. I do. He's a businessman at heart. Everything's a calculation of risk and reward. Revenge is emotional, expensive, inefficient. Adrian turned to look at me. He'll run. And eventually, the feds will find him. That's how this ends. You sound very certain. I have to be, because the alternative is spending every day looking over our shoulders, jumping at shadows, never believing we're actually safe. He pulled me around to face him fully. I'm done living that way, Elena. I want to build something different, something real. With me. With you. He confirmed, his eyes searching mine. If you'll have me. Knowing everything you know now. Knowing I'm complicit and flawed and still figuring out how to be the kind of man worth loving. I thought about Mateo's letter. About his desperate attempt to become someone clean before coming back to me. About how that desperation had killed him. I don't need you to be clean, I said carefully. I need you to be honest, present, willing to keep trying even when it's hard. That's enough. Is it? His voice was raw. Because some days I wake up and I don't recognize myself. The man I'm becoming, he's softer, more vulnerable, more afraid than Adrian Moretti is supposed to be. And I don't know if that's growth or just weakness wearing a different name. I cupped his face in my hands, made him look at me. It's growth. And it's terrifying, but that's how you know it's real. I leaned forward, pressed my forehead to his. We're both becoming different people, Adrian. People who tell the truth. People who take responsibility. People who love messily and imperfectly and without guarantees. That's not weakness. That's courage. He kissed me then, slow and deep and full of everything we couldn't say out loud. When we finally pulled apart, the city had transformed around us. The lights seemed brighter. The air tasted cleaner. The future felt less like a threat and more like a possibility. "Morrison wants us in court next week for pre-trial motions," Adrian said against my hair. "Ricardo's team is going to try to get the trafficking evidence suppressed, argue that Mateo's testimony is hearsay since he's dead." Can they do that? They can try, but we have corroborating evidence from the survivors, financial records, forensics. They'll lose. He pulled back to look at me. But it's going to be brutal. They'll drag Mateo through the mud. Drag you through the mud. Drag me through the mud. Try to make the jury think we're all equally guilty. Aren't we? I asked quietly. In different ways? Maybe. But guilt isn't binary. It's not, you're either innocent or you're a monster. It's a spectrum. And where you fall on that spectrum matters less than what you do about it. He stood, pulled me up with him. "Come on. Let's go inside. I want to show you something." He led me to his office, a room I'd rarely entered, full of mahogany and leather and the weight of family history. He pulled out a drawer, removed a file folder. "These are the articles of incorporation for the new company. Moretti Enterprises, completely restructured. Legitimate businesses only. Real estate development, hospitality, investment management, everything documented, everything legal, everything clean." I flipped through the papers, saw Adrian's signature on every page. "When did you do this?" "Yesterday. While you were with your therapist?" He looked almost shy. "I wanted to have something concrete to show you. Proof that I'm serious about changing. I never doubted you were serious. Maybe I doubted myself," he admitted. "But then I watched you in that deposition. Watched you sit there and tell the most painful truth about Mateo, about yourself, without flinching. And I thought, if she can be that brave, so can I." I set down the folder, wrapped my arms around him. "We're doing it," I whispered. "Actually doing it. Building something new." "Yeah." His voice was thick with emotion. "We are." That night, I dreamed of Mateo. Not the Mateo I'd loved, the gentle fiction with careful hands and Sunday promises. Not the Mateo from the photographs, hard-eyed and complicit in horrors, but something in between. A young man drowning in choices he couldn't take back, reaching for redemption like it was a life raft, and sinking before he could grab hold. In the dream, he stood on a dock at night, the water black and infinite behind him. He held the compass he'd made me, turned it over in his hands. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice was exactly as I remembered, for all of it. "I know." I stood across from him, the distance between us impossible to cross. "I'm sorry, too, for not seeing. You couldn't have saved me." He smiled, sad and beautiful. "I was already drowning long before you came along. You were just the light I swam toward. And when I realized the light was leading me away from the darkness I'd created." He shook his head. "I wasn't strong enough to follow all the way. But Adrian is," I said, understanding suddenly why Mateo had written what he had in that final letter. "You knew he could be. That's why you left me with him." "I left you with him because he's the only person I ever trusted to keep promises I couldn't." Mateo held out the compass. This symbol, our family crest, it was supposed to mean honor, loyalty, protection. My father corrupted it. Ricardo destroyed it. But Adrian can reclaim it. With you. He set the compass down on the dock between us, took a step backward toward the water. "Wait." I started forward, but he shook his head. "I'm already gone, Elena. Have been for 3 years. This is just your mind giving you closure." He smiled again, gentle and sad. "Live loudly. Live without fear. Live for both of us." He stepped off the dock into darkness, and I woke up gasping. Adrian was beside me instantly, pulling me into his arms. "Bad dream." "No." I breathed against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath my palm. "Closure." He didn't ask me to explain, just held me while my breathing slowed, while the dream faded into memory, while the first light of dawn started painting the city in shades of gold. "Marcus Leone was found," he said quietly. "Morrison called. They picked him up trying to board a private plane to Costa Rica. He's back in custody." Relief flooded through me so powerfully it felt like falling. It's really over. The running part is. The healing part. He pulled back to look at me. That's just starting. I thought about Mateo's dream self stepping into darkness. About Adrian's hands building something new from the ruins of his family's empire. About my own transformation from the girl who dropped a compass in a cafe to the woman who could stand in federal court and tell complicated truths without flinching. I'm ready, I said. For the healing part. For whatever comes next. Even if it's messy. Even if we don't get it right the first time. Even if some days we're still figuring out who we are. Especially then. I kissed him, tasting coffee and possibility. That's when it matters most. When it's hard and messy and we show up anyway. Outside, the city was waking up. People starting their days, building their lives, carrying their own complicated histories. And somewhere in that vast web of human experience, we were just two people trying to become better versions of ourselves. Not heroes, not villains, just human, imperfect, trying together. And somehow, impossibly, that was enough. The courtroom smelled like old wood and broken promises. I sat in the witness box 3 weeks after Marcus Leone's recapture, my hand on a Bible that felt heavier than it should, and wondered if truth could actually set anyone free, or if that was just another comfortable lie we told ourselves to make the hard choices feel bearable. Patricia Vance stood before me in a navy suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, her expression carefully neutral as she prepared to dissect every word I'd say. Behind her, Ricardo Leone sat at the defense table, his face a mask of aristocratic disdain. Like this was all beneath him. The courtroom, the charges, the very concept that he could be held accountable for the bodies he'd left in his wake. Adrian sat in the gallery, Vincent beside him, both of them radiating the kind of controlled tension that came from watching someone you cared about walk into crossfire. Morrison occupied the prosecution table with 2 other attorneys, her expression professionally confident in a way that didn't quite hide the worry in her eyes. This was the moment everything had been building toward, not the depositions or the pretrial motions or the endless hours of witness preparation. This, me, standing in front of 12 strangers and explaining how loving someone could make you complicit in horrors you never saw coming. Miss Brooks. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed man named David Chen, no relation to the agent Ricardo had killed, approached with the careful courtesy of someone handling something fragile. Can you tell the court how you met Matteo Moretti? I took a breath, centered myself in the truth I'd spent 3 years running from. A coffee shop in Capitol Hill. 3.5 years ago. I was working on design mock-ups for a client, and he asked if the seat across from me was taken. The memory was so vivid it hurt. Matteo's shy smile, the way he'd fumbled with his order, the gentleness in his eyes that I'd mistaken for innocence. He told me he was studying engineering, that he loved how buildings could be both beautiful and functional, that he wanted to design spaces where people felt safe. And did you believe him? Completely. I met Chen's eyes. He was exactly what I needed. Quiet, steady, uncomplicated. Or so I thought. When did you realize he wasn't who he claimed to be? 3 years too late. The words came out harder than I intended. When Adrian Moretti picked up a compass keychain Matteo had made me and recognized his family's crest. When he told me Matteo was dead. When everything I thought I knew revealed itself as carefully constructed fiction. Chen nodded, walked me through the timeline, meeting Matteo, the relationship that developed, the small inconsistencies I'd ignored because acknowledging them would have shattered the comfortable world I was building. His late-night phone calls, his unexplained absences, the way he'd sometimes look at me like he was memorizing my face in case he never saw it again. Did Matteo ever discuss his work with you? He talked about engineering projects that didn't exist, about classes he never attended, about a future we were building that was all fabrication. I paused, chose my next words carefully. But he never discussed what he actually did. Never mentioned Ricardo Leone or trafficking operations or the people whose lives were being destroyed while I slept beside him, believing we were building something real. Because he was protecting you? Because he was protecting himself. The realization had come slowly, painfully, in therapy sessions where I'd been forced to examine my own willingness to accept easy answers. If I knew the truth, I might leave. Or worse, I might stay and become complicit. Either way, his carefully controlled world would shatter. Vance stood immediately. Objection, Speculation about the victim's motivations. Sustained. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, looked at me. The witness will confine herself to facts, not interpretations. Yes, Your Honor. I steadied myself. The fact is that Mateo lied, extensively, about everything that mattered, and I chose to believe those lies because the alternative was terrifying. Chen walked me through the rest. Mateo's disappearance, the 3 years I'd spent believing he'd abandoned me, the night Adrian had recognized the compass and everything had unraveled. With each answer, I felt the jury's eyes on me, judging not just my testimony but my character. Wondering how someone could be so blind, whether my ignorance was genuine or a convenient excuse. Then Chen pulled out the photographs Morrison had shown me weeks ago. Mateo in that warehouse, watching as people were loaded into shipping containers, participating in the very crimes that would eventually drive him to become an informant. Miss Brooks, I need to show you some evidence that may be difficult. Chen's voice was gentle, but the images he projected on the screen were brutal in their clarity. Can you identify the man in these photographs? That's Mateo. My voice came out steadier than I felt. 3 years ago, based on his appearance, before I met him. And what is he doing in these images? I looked at the photographs. Really looked. Forcing myself to see what I'd initially wanted to deny. He's participating in human trafficking, helping Ricardo Leone's operation move victims, being complicit in crimes that destroyed lives. I met Chen's eyes. He was guilty. Before he tried to make it right, he was guilty. The courtroom was silent. Even Vance seemed surprised by my directness. Does that change your testimony about what he later tried to do? About his cooperation with federal agents? No. Both things are true. He participated in evil, and then he tried to stop it. His redemption doesn't erase his guilt, but his guilt doesn't erase his attempt at redemption. He was human, complicated, capable of terrible things and desperate efforts to make them right. I looked at the jury. We all are. Chen nodded slowly, then turned to the judge. No further questions. Vance stood immediately, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor as she approached. Miss Brooks, you've painted quite a picture of Mateo Moretti. Liar, criminal, participant in trafficking. And yet you expect this jury to believe his evidence against my client. I expect the jury to evaluate the evidence on its merits, not on whether Mateo was perfect. I kept my voice level. The financial records are real. The survivor testimony is real. The forensic evidence is real. Mateo's moral complexity doesn't change any of that. But it does change his credibility, doesn't it? A man who lied to you about everything. Why should we believe anything he documented? Because his lies were personal, about who he was, what he did, the life he was living. But his documentation of Ricardo's operation was meticulous, cross-referenced, verified by federal agents before his death. I leaned forward slightly. He lied about himself. He told the truth about the crimes. And you can distinguish between those two things? Even though you admittedly believed his personal lies for years. The question was designed to undermine me. But I'd spent weeks in therapy examining exactly this. Understanding how I'd been complicit in my own deception. I can now. Because I've learned that the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves. I looked directly at Vance. I wanted Mateo to be innocent, uncomplicated, safe, so I ignored evidence to the contrary. I chose comfort over truth, but that doesn't mean I can't recognize truth now that I've stopped running from it. Vance's expression flickered, surprise or respect. I couldn't tell. Let's talk about your relationship with Adrian Moretti. Objection. Chen stood. Relevance? Goes to bias, Your Honor. The witness is romantically involved with the brother of her supposed victim, a man whose organization employed my client. Her testimony may be influenced by that relationship. The judge considered, I'll allow it, but keep it focused. Miss Vance. Vance turned back to me. You're living with Adrian Moretti now, is that correct? Yes. The same Adrian Moretti who ran the organization that provided cover for Ricardo Leone's trafficking operation. Adrian didn't know about the trafficking. That was Ricardo's. But he should have known, shouldn't he? As the head of the organization, as the person responsible for oversight, he should have questioned why certain warehouses were off limits, why certain shipments were compartmentalized, why Ricardo was suddenly so wealthy. I met her eyes steadily. Yes, he should have. And he's testified to that. He's accepted responsibility for his failure to see what was happening under his authority. That's not deflection, that's accountability. Or it's a convenient narrative. The reformed criminal helping the FBI dismantle his rival's operation while preserving his own interests? Vance's voice was sharp. Isn't it possible that Adrian Moretti is using you, Miss Brooks? Just like his brother did? Except this time, instead of lies about engineering, he's feeding you lies about redemption. The question hit harder than I expected, because I'd asked myself the same thing in the dark hours of early morning, lying beside Adrian and wondering if I was repeating the same pattern, choosing comfort over truth, believing what I wanted to believe because the alternative was too painful. It's possible, I admitted, but I don't think it's true. And the difference between now and then is that I'm choosing this with my eyes open. I know Adrian's complicit. I know he's flawed. I know he's still figuring out how to be the kind of man worth trusting. But I also know he's trying. Actually trying. And that matters. Does it? Does trying erase guilt? No. But it's the difference between staying complicit and working towards something better. It's the difference between Mateo before he met Sarah Kim and Mateo after. Between Adrian before Bainbridge Island and Adrian now. I paused. You're asking me if redemption is possible. I don't know. But I know that effort is real. Change is real. And people are capable of becoming better than they were. Even people who profit from human suffering. Even them. Especially them. Because if we don't believe people can change, then what's the point of any of this? I gestured to the courtroom. Why have trials? Why have rehabilitation? Why not just accept that people are what they are and nothing can alter it? Vance studied me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression. Not agreement exactly, but understanding. Recognition that I wasn't a naive victim or a calculating liar, but something more complicated. Someone who'd been forced to hold multiple truths simultaneously and learn to live in the discomfort. No further questions, she said finally, returning to her seat. The judge looked at Chen. Redirect? Briefly, Your Honor. Chen approached again. Miss Brooks. One final question. Knowing everything you know now, about Mateo's crimes, about Adrian's complicity, about your own failure to see what was in front of you, do you believe Ricardo Leon is guilty of the charges against him? I thought about Sarah Kim, about the 17 documented victims, about the lives destroyed while men in expensive suits made calculations about profit and risk. I believe the evidence proves Ricardo Leon ran a trafficking operation that treated human beings as commodities. I believe he's responsible for deaths, trauma, and suffering that can't be quantified in a courtroom. And I believe that whatever Mateo's flaws, whatever Adrian's failures, whatever my own blindness, none of that changes the fact that Ricardo Leone made choices that destroyed lives. And those choices have consequences. Thank you, Miss Brooks. Nothing further. As I stepped down from the witness box, my legs shook with adrenaline and relief. Adrian caught my eye from the gallery, and I saw pride there. Understanding. Love that didn't require me to be perfect or untainted or anything other than human. Outside the courtroom, Morrison was waiting. You did good in there. Better than good. The jury was listening. Really listening. Will it be enough? Combined with the survivor testimony and the forensic evidence? Yes, I think it will. She glanced back toward the courtroom. Ricardo's team is going to rest their case tomorrow. Closing arguments next week. Then it's in the jury's hands. Adrian appeared beside me. Vincent a respectful distance behind. Let's get you out of here. We walked through the courthouse hallways in silence, past reporters and cameras and people whose entire understanding of us came from headlines and sound bites. Outside, the Seattle afternoon was gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that felt like an emotional state. In the car, Adrian pulled me close. You were incredible. I just told the truth. That's what made it incredible. Most people can't do that. Can't sit in front of strangers and admit their own complicity, their own failures. He kissed my temple. You're stronger than you think. Or just tired of running from who I actually am. Maybe that's the same thing. We drove back to the penthouse in comfortable silence. But as we pulled into the garage, Vincent's phone rang. His expression changed instantly. When? He listened. Understood. We're on our way. He met Adrian's eyes in the rearview mirror. Morrison needs you both back at the office. Now. They found something in Ricardo's financial records, something that changes everything. My stomach dropped. What did they find? A payment, made 2 days ago, while Ricardo was in custody, while his accounts were supposedly frozen. Vincent's voice was grim. To a contractor known for making problems disappear, and the target is listed by initials. Adrian's hand tightened on mine. What initials? Vincent showed us his phone. A document, heavily redacted, but 2 letters visible in the target field. E.B. My initials. Ricardo had put a hit out on me, from his jail cell, while I was testifying against him. And somewhere in Seattle, someone was being paid to make sure I never made it to closing arguments. The safe house Morrison moved us to was a concrete box in Georgetown that smelled like industrial cleaner and fear. No windows. Reinforced door. A single room with a bed bolted to the floor and fluorescent lights that hummed like insects. Adrian paced the perimeter like a caged animal, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and lethal as he coordinated with Vincent and Morrison's team. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands, these ordinary hands that someone had decided were worth killing. The contractor's name is Daniel Frost. Morrison stood in the doorway, her expression carved from stone. Former military, dishonorably discharged. He's worked for the Leone family before. 3 confirmed kills we could never prove. If Ricardo hired him, he's serious about finishing this. How did Ricardo make the payment from custody? Adrian stopped pacing, his whole body radiating controlled violence. His accounts are frozen. His communications are monitored. How the hell did he get word out? His lawyer, Morrison's jaw tightened. Patricia Vance, we're executing a warrant on her office now, but she's already disappeared. Turned off her phone, abandoned her apartment, probably halfway to a country without extradition by now. The betrayal was almost elegant in its simplicity. Ricardo's defense attorney, the woman who'd questioned me in court with such professional courtesy, had been facilitating murder while arguing legal motions. So what now? My voice came out steadier than I felt. I hide here until Frost gets tired of looking. Until Ricardo's trial ends and he has no more reason to want me dead. We find Frost first. Adrian's eyes were dark, promising violence. We eliminate the threat before it reaches you. Adrian. Morrison's voice carried a warning. You're a cooperating witness now. You can't what? Protect someone I care about? That's not negotiable, Morrison. You put her on that stand. You made her a target. Now you get to decide if you want my help finding Frost or if you want to read about what happens when I handle this my way. The air in the room crackled with tension. Morrison studied Adrian for a long moment, and I saw her making calculations, risk versus reward, control versus chaos, the law versus what was necessary. 48 hours. She said finally, you work with my team. You follow protocol. You don't go rogue. And if we can't locate Frost in that time, we move Elena to a federal facility under protective custody until the trial concludes. Deal. Morrison left, and suddenly the room felt smaller. Just me and Adrian and the weight of someone wanting me erased from existence. I should have seen this coming. Adrian's voice was rough with guilt. Should have anticipated that Ricardo would make a move. That's what I would do. Eliminate the witnesses, create reasonable doubt, walk away clean. Stop. I stood, crossed to him, placed my hands on his chest until he looked at me. This isn't your fault, and it's not mine. It's Ricardo's. He made this choice. He hired a killer. He decided my testimony was worth murder. And I decided to let you testify. To put you in front of cameras and reporters and a jury where Ricardo could see you. Could target you. His hands came up to frame my face, trembling slightly. I should have protected you better. You did protect me. You are protecting me. I held his gaze. But Adrian, I need you to understand something. I chose this. I chose to testify. I chose to tell the truth even knowing it would make me vulnerable. That was my decision, and I don't regret it. You might, if Frost succeeds, then we make sure he doesn't. I leaned into his touch. You said we're in this together. That means I don't hide while you fight. That means we figure this out as partners, not as protector and protected. Something shifted in his expression. Fear giving way to reluctant respect. You're serious. Completely. Morrison gave us 48 hours to find Frost, so let's find him. The hunt began with patterns. Frost was a professional, which meant he had routines, safe houses he used, contacts he trusted, methods he relied on. Adrian pulled up files Vincent had compiled, surveillance photos, known associates, financial transactions traced through layers of shell companies. We spread everything across the small table in our concrete box, creating a map of a killer's life. He uses 3 safe houses in Seattle. Adrian pointed to addresses marked on a map. 1 in Ballard, 1 in White Center, 1 near SeaTac. Morrison's teams are watching all 3, but he hasn't shown. Maybe he knows we're looking. He definitely knows. That's why he hasn't moved yet. Adrian traced routes between the safe houses. He's waiting for us to make a mistake, to think we're safe, to let our guard down. Or he's waiting for me to leave this bunker. I studied the map, seeing not just addresses but possibilities. Morrison said 48 hours until they move me to federal custody. That's his timeline. He has to act before then or lose his chance. So he'll make a move soon. Tomorrow, maybe tonight. Adrian's voice was grim. Which means we need to be ready. Or we need to stop waiting and draw him out. The words hung between us. Adrian looked at me like I'd suggested jumping off a bridge. Absolutely not. We are not using you as bait. Why not? It's what he's expecting. Me hiding, surrounded by protection, impossible to reach. So we do the opposite. We make me visible, vulnerable, give him an opportunity he can't resist. And when he takes that opportunity, when he shows up with a gun and professional training and zero hesitation about killing you, then what? Then Morrison's team takes him down. You take him down. We end this before the trial, before Ricardo can send anyone else, before I have to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. Adrian stood abruptly, walked to the far wall, pressed his forehead against the concrete like he could push through it by force of will alone. I can't do this. Can't watch you put yourself in danger deliberately. Not after everything we've been through to keep you alive. I crossed to him, placed my hand on his back, felt the tension vibrating through him. Do you trust me? That's not the question. Yes, it is. Do you trust me to know my own limits? To understand the risks and choose anyway? Or do you think I'm still that girl who dropped a compass in a cafe and needed saving? He turned to face me, and I saw the war in his eyes, the instinct to protect versus the knowledge that I was right, that hiding wouldn't keep me safe, that the only way to end this was to control when and how Frost made his move. I trust you, he said finally. I just don't trust the universe not to take you from me. Then help me make sure it doesn't. I took his hands. Work with me. Plan this properly. Give me every advantage, every protection, every backup plan, but let me do this. Let me be the one who decides how my story ends. The silence stretched. Then Adrian nodded once, sharp and final. Okay, we do this your way, but we do it smart, controlled, with every precaution possible. Agreed. He pulled out his phone, called Morrison. When she answered, he put it on speaker. We have a plan, and you're going to hate it. 24 hours later, I walked out of Morrison's federal building into the gray Seattle afternoon, like I didn't have a care in the world. Vincent drove, but he was visible. No hiding, no pretending I was alone. We took the route Adrian had predicted Frost would stake out, the one that passed through 3 separate vantage points where a professional could set up surveillance. I wore a tracker sewn into my jacket, another in my shoe, and a panic button disguised as a necklace that would summon Morrison's tactical team in under 90 seconds. Adrian followed in a separate vehicle with Morrison's best agents, close enough to respond but far enough not to spook Frost. The whole operation was a carefully choreographed dance where I was the music everyone moved to. You okay? Vincent's voice was gentle, concerned. No, I admitted. But I'm doing it anyway. That's called courage. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. He checked the rearview mirror. We've got eyes on 3 possible contacts. Morrison's team is monitoring traffic cameras, cell signals, anything that might indicate Frost's location. And if he doesn't take the bait, then we try again tomorrow, and the day after, until either he makes a move or we find him first. Vincent's hands tightened on the wheel. But my money's on today. You're too good a target to pass up. Visible, seemingly vulnerable, with just one driver between you and him. We pulled up to the penthouse building, the one Adrian and I had been living in before Morrison moved us to the safe house. The routine was deliberate. I'd get out, walk through the lobby, take the elevator up, making myself visible at every stage. Frost would see an opportunity. A moment when I was isolated in the elevator, or in the penthouse before Adrian arrived, or in any of a dozen scenarios we'd wargamed the night before. I stepped out of the car and the world suddenly felt hyper-real. Every sound too loud. Every shadow a potential threat. The doorman nodded at me, one of Morrison's agents in disguise. The lobby had 3 more positioned as maintenance workers and residents. The elevator had cameras feeding directly to Morrison's command center. I was the most protected, vulnerable person in Seattle. And still, my heart hammered as the elevator doors closed and I rose toward the penthouse alone. Adrian's voice came through the earpiece Morrison had made me wear. "I'm right behind you, 30 seconds out. Morrison's team is in position." "You're not alone, Elena." "I know," I whispered, even though no one could hear except through the microphone. "I trust you." The elevator opened onto the penthouse floor. Empty hallway. Soft lighting. Everything exactly as we'd left it 48 hours ago. I walked to the door, used my key, stepped inside. The space felt different now. Not like home, but like a stage set. A place where something inevitable was about to happen. I moved to the kitchen, poured water I didn't want, creating motion that would be visible through the windows to anyone watching from nearby buildings. Played the role of someone who thought she was safe. That's when I heard it. A sound so subtle I almost missed it. The whisper of the balcony door sliding open. Frost had been inside the whole time. I didn't turn, didn't react. Just kept holding the glass of water. My hand steady, even though my heart was trying to escape my chest. "Miss Brooks." His voice was professional, almost apologetic. "I need you to stay very still. Morrison knows you're here," I said quietly. "Her team is already on their way." "Then we don't have much time." I heard him move closer. "Ricardo sends his regards. Says you should have taken the hint after Bainbridge Island." "And what hint is that? That some people can't be redeemed. Some crimes can't be forgiven. Some testimonies are worth dying to prevent." I turned slowly, carefully, and saw him, mid-40s, average height, with the kind of face you'd forget immediately. He held a gun equipped with a suppressor, aimed at my center mass. Professional, efficient, already imagining me dead. Behind him, the penthouse door opened silently. Adrian moved like death itself. Vincent beside him. Morrison's tactical team flooding in from every entry point. Frost realized his mistake the moment before it ended. Realized he'd been so focused on me that he'd missed the real trap, that the vulnerable woman alone in her apartment was never the target. She was the bait that brought the predator into the light. "Drop the weapon." Adrian's voice was cold. Final. "This is the only warning you get." Frost's gun wavered. In his eyes, I saw the calculation. Could he shoot me before they shot him? Was one dead witness worth his own life? He decided it wasn't. The gun clattered to the floor. Morrison's team moved in, securing him with practiced efficiency. And I stood there in my kitchen, holding a glass of water, realizing I'd just helped catch a professional killer by being brave enough to look like prey. Adrian crossed to me immediately, pulled me into his arms with such force it hurt. "Never again." His voice was muffled against my hair. "Never fucking again." Agreed. I was shaking now, adrenaline draining away. That was terrifying. "You were incredible." I was bait. "You were brave." He pulled back to look at me. "And you were right. We ended it. On our terms. Together." Morrison appeared, her expression caught between professional approval and personal concern. "Frost is already talking. Gave up Ricardo, Vance, and 3 other people involved in the conspiracy. This case just became airtight." She looked at me. "You okay?" "I will be." I leaned into Adrian's warmth. "How long until the trial resumes?" 2 days. Ricardo's legal team is in chaos with Vance's disappearance. The judge is expediting everything. You'll probably have closing arguments by week's end, jury deliberation right after. And then you get your life back." Morrison's voice softened. "Both of you. Whatever that looks like now." After she left, after the tactical team cleared out and the crime scene techs finished documenting evidence, Adrian and I stood alone in the penthouse that had become a trap that had become our victory. "What does our life look like?" I asked quietly. "After all this?" "I don't know." Adrian's honesty was raw, real. But I want to find out. With you. Building something that isn't about survival or danger or constantly looking over our shoulders. Something normal? Something real. He corrected. Normal's overrated, but real. Honest, complicated, built on choices instead of fear. That's worth having. I turned in his arms, looked up at him. Then let's have it. After the trial ends. After Ricardo's convicted. After we've done everything we can to make sure those survivors get justice. Let's build something real. He kissed me then, deep and desperate, and full of promises neither of us knew if we could keep. But we'd try, together. Two broken people learning to be whole, one honest moment at a time. Outside, Seattle sparkled under clearing skies, and for the first time since a compass fell from my pocket 3 months ago, the future felt less like a threat and more like a gift I was brave enough to accept. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. 6 hours of sitting in Morrison's office with cold coffee and mounting tension, watching the clock like it held answers instead of just the relentless forward march of time. Adrian paced circuits between the window and the door, his movements precise and controlled even as I could see the anxiety eating him alive. Vincent stood guard outside, unnecessary now but present anyway. Some habits were harder to break than others. I sat curled in the corner of Morrison's couch, Mateo's compass in my hands. Not the original, that was evidence, locked away in some federal storage facility. But Adrian had commissioned a replica identical except for one detail. On the back, where Mateo had engraved the family crest, there was now a different symbol. A phoenix rising from flames. New life from destruction. The kind of hope that required burning everything down first. They're taking too long. Adrian stopped at the window, his reflection overlaid against the Seattle skyline. 6 hours means they're divided. Arguing. Someone's not convinced? Or they're being thorough. Morrison looked up from her laptop, her expression professionally neutral but her eyes betraying concern. Complex case, multiple charges, 17 victims. They're doing their job. Their job is to convict the man who destroyed lives for profit. Their job is to evaluate evidence and reach a verdict based on law, not emotion. Morrison's voice was gentle but firm. We presented everything we had. The survivors testified. The financial records are ironclad. Frost's testimony tied Ricardo directly to the hit on Elena. The case is solid. Adrian. Solid cases lose all the time. He was right, and we all knew it. Juries were unpredictable. Patricia Vance's disappearance had created sympathy for Ricardo. The defendant abandoned by his own attorney, left to face charges without adequate representation. Never mind that Vance had fled because she was complicit in attempted murder. Never mind that Ricardo had orchestrated everything from his jail cell. The narrative of the underdog, the man fighting alone against federal overreach, was seductive even when it was fiction. My phone buzzed. A text from the victim advocate Morrison had assigned to coordinate with the survivors. They're scared, asking if he'll walk. What do I tell them? I showed the message to Morrison. She read it, her jaw tightening. Tell them the truth. That we did everything we could. That their courage in testifying mattered. And that regardless of the verdict, we won't stop fighting to dismantle what Ricardo built. It wasn't the reassurance they wanted, but it was honest. I typed out a response echoing Morrison's words, trying to inject hope I wasn't sure I felt. Adrian's phone rang. He answered immediately, listened for 10 seconds. Then his whole body went rigid. They're coming back. Verdict's in. The courtroom felt different this time. Heavier, like the air itself understood the weight of what was about to happen. I sat in the gallery beside Adrian. Our hands clasped so tightly my fingers went numb. Morrison and her team occupied the prosecution table, their expressions carefully controlled. Ricardo sat at the defense table flanked by a court-appointed attorney, who'd had 3 days to prepare for a case that had been building for months. He looked smaller than I remembered. More human. Almost sympathetic if you didn't know what he'd done. The jury filed in, 12 faces carefully blank. None of them looked at Ricardo, and I felt Adrian's hand tighten on mine. That's good, he whispered. When they don't look at the defendant, it usually means guilty. Usually. The judge, the same steel-gray woman who'd presided over my testimony, called the court to order. The formality of it felt surreal, like we were all actors in a play where the ending had already been written, but no one had bothered to tell us what it was. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman stood, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a teacher's posture. She held a piece of paper that contained 6 hours of deliberation, weeks of testimony, and the futures of 17 survivors who deserved to know their suffering had been witnessed. We have, Your Honor, on the charge of human trafficking, how do you find? Guilty. The word detonated like a bomb in the silent courtroom. I felt Adrian's hand shake in mine, felt my own breath release in a rush I hadn't known I was holding. On the charge of racketeering, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, how do you find? Guilty. 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 17 charges, 17 guilty verdicts, each one falling like a hammer on Ricardo's carefully constructed defense. He sat motionless at the defense table, his face a mask that couldn't quite hide the devastation underneath. This was his legacy now. Not the empire he'd built or the wealth he'd accumulated, just this. Guilty. The judge thanked the jury, set a sentencing date for 6 weeks out, and dismissed the court. In the chaos of people standing and gathering belongings and reporters rushing for the doors, Adrian pulled me into his arms and just held me. Not celebrating, not crying, just existing together in the strange space between one chapter ending and another beginning. Morrison appeared beside us, her expression softer than I'd ever seen it. It's over. Ricardo will spend the rest of his life in federal prison. Marcus Leone is facing similar charges. The network is dismantled. The survivors get their day, their justice, their acknowledgement that what happened to them mattered. She paused. You both did good. Better than good. What happens now? I asked. To us? To the cooperation agreement? Now you build your life. Adrian's transition to legitimate business is progressing well. The Moretti family enterprises are clean, documented, exactly what we agreed to. You've both fulfilled your obligations. Morrison smiled slightly. You're free? Actually free? No more looking over your shoulders? Free. The word felt foreign. For 3 months, my entire existence had been defined by this trial, by the constant vigilance, by the knowledge that someone wanted me dead. And now that weight was just gone, lifted like fog burning off in sunlight. I don't know how to do that, I admitted. Be free. Just exist without danger as the baseline. Then you learn. Morrison's voice was gentle. Together, one boring, normal, beautifully ordinary day at a time. 3 months later, I stood in the offices of Moretti Enterprises, the new version, the legitimate one, and looked at the job offer Adrian had placed in front of me. Director of Community Development. I read the title twice. Adrian, I'm a waitress with a design degree. I'm not qualified to... You're qualified to see patterns others miss, to understand complexity, to care about people as individuals, not statistics. He leaned against his desk, arms crossed, watching me with those whiskey-colored eyes that had learned to show vulnerability. This position is about rebuilding the relationship between our company and the communities we operate in, making sure our development projects actually serve people, not just profit margins. Who better than someone who's seen what happens when power operates without accountability? I studied the offer, the salary, the benefits, the scope of work. It was real, substantial, the kind of opportunity I'd never imagined for myself back when my biggest concern was memorizing the Silvergate Cafe's drink specials. I'll need time to learn, to make mistakes. You'll have both, and support. A team. Resources. Adrian pushed off the desk, crossed to where I stood. But more than that, you'll have purpose. A way to take everything you've learned and use it to actually change things. I looked up at him. This man who'd been a stranger 3 months ago and was now the person who knew me better than anyone. Who'd seen me at my worst and loved me anyway. Who was learning, just like me, how to build something real from the ruins of who we'd been. Okay. I set down the offer letter. I'll do it, on one condition. What's that? We visit Mateo's grave. Together. And we tell him what we're building, what we're trying to become. He deserves to know his death wasn't meaningless. Something shifted in Adrian's expression, grief mixing with acceptance. The kind of complicated emotion that came from loving a brother who'd been both hero and villain. Deal. We drove to Portland on a Saturday morning when the autumn light turned everything golden and forgiving. The cemetery was old, peaceful, tucked away from the city's noise. Mateo's headstone was simple, just his name, his dates, And the phrase Adrian had chosen, he tried to be better. Not a hero's epitaph, not even a good man's epitaph. Just the truth. He tried. I placed flowers at the base of the stone, wild flowers, the kind Mateo used to bring me on Sunday mornings when he was pretending to be someone he wasn't. Adrian stood beside me, silent, his hand finding mine. I don't know if you can hear this. I spoke to the stone, to the memory, to whatever remained of the man I'd loved. But I need you to know, your trying mattered. It didn't erase what you'd done. It didn't save you. But it saved other people. 17 documented survivors who got justice because you documented everything. Because you chose truth over self-preservation. My voice cracked, and Adrian's hand tightened on mine. And it saved me, I continued. Not by keeping me safe, you couldn't do that. But by teaching me that love isn't about protection, it's about truth. Even when truth is ugly and complicated and doesn't fit the story you wanted to tell. Adrian stepped forward, placed his hand on the headstone. You were right about one thing, little brother. I am better at protecting people than you were. His voice was thick with emotion. But you were better at seeing what needed to change. At having the courage to burn everything down and start over. I'm trying to learn that from you. Trying to build something that would make you proud, or at least make you think your death bought something worth the price. We stood there in the golden light, two broken people holding on to each other and the memory of someone who'd tried to save them both and managed to do it even through dying. When we finally left, I looked back once. The compass Adrian had made me caught the light, the phoenix gleaming against my chest. New life from destruction. Hope built on honest foundations. What now? I asked as we walked back to the car. Adrian pulled me close, kissed the top of my head. Now we live loudly, without fear. Exactly like Mateo wanted for you, for both of us. It won't be perfect. No, he agreed. But it'll be real. Honest. Built on choices, not fear. And that's enough. We drove back to Seattle as the sun set behind us, painting the sky in shades of orange and red and gold. Behind us, the past, all its violence and lies and desperate attempts at redemption. Ahead, the future, uncertain, complicated, beautiful in its possibility. Two people learning to be whole. Learning to love without hiding. Learning that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose to believe that tomorrow can be different than yesterday. Not because you're guaranteed it will be, but because you're willing to do the work to make it so. Together. Always together. And somehow, impossibly, that was everything. If you made it to the end of this story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from, and click the yellow bell to subscribe to the channel and support us. Keep the adventure going by clicking on the suggested video on your screen.